a great opportunity, and I'm looking for feedback from all of you. Let me start by adding a little bit to Kate's lovely introduction of me, because it bears directly on what we're doing here. I was in Washington working for President Reagan as the director of media, a dream job, just a terrific job. I married the chief of staff of the Department of Justice, and he was a Texan. His name was even Tex, just in case you missed that. And back we came to Texas. And the question is, what was I going to do with myself? Of course, I like to make it sound very strategic, but too many people at Cox know me. And they know that what really happened was that I got lucky. The very first day I was in business without much of a business plan, I had a call with what used to be Southwestern Bell Telephone. And they were one of the first companies that encouraged their own employees to go talk to customers. So the CEO sits me down and he says, "Merrie, one of the things we've learned is that the customer doesn't remember what we thought we told them." And I remember sitting up and thinking, oh, how have I missed this all these years? But my whole attitude had been, what did I want to say? Or what did I think somebody needs to know? And of course, the minute you ask, how much do people remember from what you say, a lot or a little, shout it out, I can hear you saying, it's just a little. Absolutely. See, I could hear them, Kate, even there, even through the screen. And I wondered if anybody had studied that. Our second calls were set up with the Baylor Healthcare System and with the national accounting and consulting firm, Arthur Andersen. And both of them hired us just based on this insight, but they gave us different assignments. Baylor said, we don't do a good job getting all of our people involved. Help us figure that out. And that's grown over 3 decades to this concept that everybody who works for you talks about you. So one of the tasks is to understand how this works, how you enlist people, how you equip them, how you deploy them, and most of all, how you line that up with your strategic business goals. The Arthur folks said, this is a seminal insight, and we're going to invest in you. But we want you to design a model, a strategic planning model we can use, and a methodology. So what I want to do tonight is spend just a little bit of time introducing you to the model, which we call the influence model, showing you some of the implications for it, because we expect a lot of you going forward. Whatever industry you're in, whatever field you're in the communications business. And your leadership skills, both in terms of your personal communication and in terms of being able to manage communication, have never been more important. Now, the manual that I'm using here doesn't exactly match the manual that Kate sent out to you. We are still in the adaptation process, but I'm going to pick out pieces of it so you'll find them in that manual. The point of sending you the communication as a strategic business tool manual is so you've got something as a reference guide. But let's start with the manual. And we're going to take a look at the model. And we call it the influence model because what we're after is moving. This is a journey that you're on. And it starts with everybody thinking, what do I want to say? What do I think somebody needs to know? But the next thing you want to ask is, who's my audience? Who are the people here that I want to influence? The first thing we look at is the formal network of communication. That's everything over here. And I'm sure you recognize a lot of these things: advertising, marketing, website, brochure, direct mail, all the things that you're useful. PowerPoint. We may take a little bit of time on PowerPoint today. Okay. And again, the formal networks are described as the audience knows that you control these. Okay. We're actually going to spend our time over here on the informal networks of communication. And that's divided into 2 categories. One is media, which of course is changing as we speak. And 2 is verbal communication, which is everything from speaking to groups to, of course, the most important, which is what we call person to person, particularly when it's what we call video enabled. And the goal is to understand how to integrate all of these networks, thinking who's the audience and how do I influence what they hear, what they believe, and what they remember. And then remembering that they're all going to go talk to somebody else. So what we want to do is we want to enlist these people to carry a message to the people out here. And now I just need to get back to you.
Merrie, this is Kate. It's a little bit hard to see your PDFs. It's a little, but are these also on what we sent out? Can they?
Yes. Yeah, they
Okay.
should be in there.
I think there's a
Hang on, I need to get back to. Okay. Well, we're only going to do a little of that. Okay. So back we are again. Right now, we're going to start with an example from FedEx. Kate mentioned that they're a longtime client of ours since 1971. This methodology is built into their DNA around the world. And the first one we're going to start with is an example of Fred Smith, their iconic CEO and leader. And we're going to take a look at an appearance of his on Fortune Television. So that's a business publication, although here we're looking at the TV channel of this. And of course, when you deal with any kind of enterprise, the first audience that you want to rally are your own employees. So I want you to listen to the first question that Mr. Smith gets, and then his response. And I want you to actually spot the words that he wants FedEx employees to hear him verbalizing. And if you listen really carefully, he's also going to tell you what their business model is. And Kate, I'm going to try and see after we do, when I ask people, what are the words? Let's see if they can shout them out if you can hear them. Okay, so here's Fred. Here we go.
We're in an economically tough time. We see an awful lot of companies laying off employees and dialing back pay, benefits, and other things for the employees they've got. Any advice on dealing with this from the perspective of an employer?
Well, in our particular business, and I make no pretense that I'm an expert on all businesses, but in our business, which is a very service-centric business, it's imperative that we maintain an appropriate level of motivation and focus on keeping, as we call it, our purple promise, that I will make every FedEx experience outstanding. Well, that's great for me.
Okay. So there he is. And now let's see how many of you picked them up. Okay. Let's also see, Kate, how this works. Okay. So the words he wants FedEx employees to hear him articulating are, anybody pick them up?
You can shout them out or put them in chat.
Service.
Motivation, outstanding
Service.
experience.
Yes. Yes, you're all going to have great careers. Okay. Now, there are a couple of interesting things to pick up from this. Fred knows that if the only way people hear those words or see them is over on that formal network of communication, at this point I would now walk over to the board and point it out again. Okay. That is advertising, recruiting, marketing. They're not real. They have to hear him verbalizing them. And the other things about this in terms of managerial, your business model, notice that he said, I will make every FedEx experience outstanding. That's what we call an I commitment. Now, most companies go right to a we commitment. That is a team concept. And of course, there's plenty of teamwork at FedEx. But it starts with the individual commitment because that goes both internally to FedEx and externally. And then he wraps up with that little phrase called the purple promise. And keep that in mind because the goal is to say, what are the words that you want people to hear, believe, remember, and repeat? And how do you enlist people to keep on and doing that? Now, when your goal is to say, I will make every FedEx experience outstanding, what you're trying to do is create a culture of empowerment. And that's very different from a company like UPS, which has a culture of compliance. But when you're creating a culture of empowerment, not only do you have to keep repeating it, you got to illustrate it and you have to tell stories. And hopefully I will pace myself well enough tonight to show you at least how FedEx does it. Okay, so let's talk about this concept of the words that we actually use. And this concept of alignment. These two words, okay, so here's an ad that we're going to start with from a company called Pacific Care. You'll have no trouble seeing the word they're pushing through.
Certain values never change. We
carry them with us wherever we go. At Secure Horizons, we believe these values help us give people with Medicare the kind of health plan they're looking for. Honesty. It's our best policy. So when you have questions about our health care coverage, we give you straight, honest answers.
So that could not be easier. And the word, let's try this
Honest.
again, Kate. The honesty,
Honest.
that's right. They're trying. Honesty, absolutely. You can't miss it. Okay, now, so that's the ad. That's the formal network of communication. Let's move over to this informal network of communication. This company is an acquirer, and they bought a health maintenance organization from a hospital over in Fort Worth. And there were so many questions from policyholders that the company sent out a letter to policyholders, and it said, we will put together a town hall meeting, and we'd like you to come. We'll fly in somebody who will answer your questions. So keep that ad in your mind, okay? This is the video from the town hall meeting of the same company whose advertisement you just saw, and that advertisement was playing on the air at the time of this meeting.
Yes, ma'am, the lady in the back.
I have been on Celebrex for several months, and Harris has been, I've been paying $10 a prescription. I went in January to get my prescription renewed. I was informed that Pacific Care would no longer pay for Celebrex.
I didn't know Harris in January.
I have to pay $80 a month for Celebrex.
Let's make that a generic question as opposed to personalized question, because I've heard this question from many people. Why is that transition or change occurring even before February 1st, apparently?
Yes.
On January 1st, Harris Methodist, they made this decision for economic reasons in 1999, went from an open formulary to a closed formulary. An open formulary means that you can have the drugs that are on their formulary with no prior authorizations or plan approval, if you would use the word. On January 1st, they went to a closed formulary. There are drugs on the formulary that you can have with no plan approval, but there are certain drugs then on that formulary that require plan approval. Harris Methodist did that on January 1st. I took over February 1st.
I tried again in February.
But I am...
Not on the computer, Pacific Care will not pay.
Because it is part of the closed formulary that Harris Methodist put in place January 1st.
Okay. All right, so we had that wonderful advertisement which promised us what? Honesty and straightforward answers. Okay, and he has just destroyed it. Also, let me ask you, if I can, by a show of hands, how many of you know or use regularly the word formulary? Kate, I'm not seeing very many hands. Okay, so does the lady in the audience have a clue what a formulary is? Yeah. When you use a word that's a jargon word, of course, listening just drops off. And did you catch his face in the beginning? Okay. Is this somebody who wanted to be there? Does he like us? Do we like him? Now let's take a second and skip to the end of the meeting, because all encounters come to an end. And eventually that meeting ends. The guy goes back to his corporate headquarters, and think of the lady in the audience and what she does. She's not going to suffer in silence. She's going to go and use whatever means she has and tell as many people as possible, okay, how dreadful the company is. So on one hand, you've got this terrific advertisement with a very specific promise, honesty, straightforward answers. And then you have one of the company executives appearing in front of a bunch of policyholders using jargon words like formulary. Formulary, it's not enough formulary. Okay? And looking anything like compassionate. Those are messages that we call wildly out of alignment. And I love that example. I'll keep this guy's going to live forever in my collection, because it's how we make a lot of our living, Megan and I. The people on the formal network of communication have given it a lot of thought. And then over on the informal network of communication, sometimes things just fall totally apart. Okay, so let's go back to this concept of words. And you saw Fred Smith do such a good job of identifying words like service-centric, motivation, purple promise. So words are what we look at. And there are two kinds of words that we pay attention to. Good words, they're the ones you want, like the Fred Smith words, and of course, bad ones. And they're pretty easy to identify when you do this. This is a reporter who moved next to Sarah Palin to write a book about her. She was the vice presidential candidate, of course.
There are people on the other side of the coin who, and Joe, they say this is a little creepy. How do you respond to that?
Well, you know, creepy is as creepy does. If I lived here and did something creepy, if I did what Sarah Palin is suggesting that I moved here because I had some desire to do, that would be creepy.
And of course, the word he has thoughtfully hammered home is creepy. Now, negative words go between people very easily, and they tend to dominate the conversation. Here's another example.
Kelly.
Your critics say this reveals that you are a political bully, that your style is payback. Are you, and does this compromise your ability to serve?
No, I'm not, because I am who I am, but I am not a bully.
And of course, the quote becomes, I am not a bully. Now, Kate mentioned that we do a monthly memo. I hope some of you are getting it. It's called the Bimbo Memo, and the reason for that is if you repeat and deny a negative, this goes to this concept again of how people hear things. Your listener is highly likely to overlook the denial, and they hear exactly the opposite of what you're saying. And we named the genre the Bimbo Memo, Bimbo genre, for the young woman who was caught with a high profile, but unfortunately married man. And she held a press conference and announced, I am not a bimbo, which of course just encourages everyone to think that she is. So we put out a Bimbo Memo monthly. It's real short, it's just the 3 best comments of the month, and then you can click through to everything I've collected. It's very funny, but it is a serious teaching tool. You'd be surprised how many companies get caught in this. I love headlines. We're not perverts. I'm not a lot of people don't even know what a dingo is. He's not. Here's my favorite one coming up. Okay. Because if you think back to the model, PepsiCo is a great marketing company. So if you go back to the formal network of communication, what you pay for, okay, PepsiCo would never take out an ad that said Doritos are not bad for you. And yet there's their CEO, who is a legend in her own right, tumbling into the trap. Notice what happens. She repeats the negative. It crowds out the positive, and again, it rises to become the headline. Very easy. One more on this, and then I'm going to come back to us. But if you use a negative word, it's coming back to haunt you. You would think that large companies understand this. Too frequently, they don't. Here's Merrie, the CEO of General Motors. Watch the word that she uses and what the interlocutor immediately does.
And like I said, a simple thing I said to him is no more crappy cars. And that resonates.
I said, okay,
yeah,
deal, you're on.
I mean, I think there was sometimes so many boundaries put on them that we didn't give them a recipe for success.
All right, give me a concrete example of a crappy car or a crappy innovation in a car, a crappy piece of a car that got changed.
And of course, all of you have gathered that the key word that she managed to articulate, and then it came back to her 3 times, of course, is crappy. Okay, now I want you to work for this class. And so, Kate, I'm going to ask them, I need your help on this, because I want to put them through an exercise, mainly because I want you to come out of this class, even brief as it is, with a couple things. One, a strategic concept of communication that you can apply both to your own skills and in your role as executives, and that you feel a managerial response for it. And then second, I want you to have a lot of confidence in your smarts and in your good judgment. So now we're going to look at an example of someone who is the senior scientist for a company called International Flavorings. And Kate, I'd like to ask the group a couple of examples. They can either shout them, a couple of questions, they can shout them out or put them on chat. If you work for a company that makes flavorings, what kind of industries are your clients? Who are your customers if you make flavorings? Come on, I know you've all got guesses. What are they saying, Kate?
They're saying food, beverage,
Processed
fast
foods.
food, candy, PepsiCo.
Perfect.
Food,
Got it.
snacks.
Food. Absolutely. Food and beverage. Now, what kind of issues are swirling around food and beverage companies today? What are they contending with? Health? Childhood?
Sanitation.
Obesity? Sanitation?
Let's see, yep. Nutrition, safety,
Nutrition?
allergies,
Safety, right?
GMO.
Allergies. Think of acronyms like GMOs. That's right. Absolutely. Okay. So there are a whole bunch of bad words. Now, what do you as the company want as your good words? What's the opposite, for example, of artificial? You want people to think that your flavorings are all
Natural.
natural. Bingo.
Or
And
organic is showing
Okay.
up too.
Perfect. Okay. So what did it take them, Kate? 12 seconds to do that? Okay. So all of you should be great. All right. So you did the drill. Who's the audience? Your customers. Okay. What are their concerns? You labeled them all. You thought of the bad words and you thought of the good words, organic and natural. Now let's take a look and see what actually happened and what the implications are.
You don't want to long linger because you're not going to eat more of it if it lingers.
So it's got to be a quick fix, and then
have more,
But that suggests something else.
Exactly.
Which is called addiction.
Exactly.
You're trying to create an addictive taste.
It's a good word.
Now, I'm not sure what parallel universe this guy is living in, but I think where we all live, addiction is not a good word. It is a major bad word. Okay. Now, a couple of lessons from this. The first one is who else is watching this who can cause the food and beverage companies a lot of trouble, particularly in the US. Okay. Think about it. Okay. Who else is looking at this who can weigh in? Okay. Tell me what they're saying, Kate. The FDA. Who said that? Can I see the picture? Okay, whoever said that, gold stars, because the Food and Drug Administration was listening. Okay, they jumped in. Tens of millions of dollars have been spent because this guy so happily admitted, you bet, we're the new nicotine. Okay, now think of it. You already solved the strategic need for this by thinking, who's the audience? What are the key words? Because this actually should have been real easy to handle. The questions are, aren't you trying to create an addictive taste? And of course, that's a yes/no framing question, and it should have been easy to say no. And you've already thought about where you're going. Our tastes are all, and think of the two words you've just put on the table, organic and one more. Natural, yes. Okay. And that's literally how the thought process works. Now let's go take a look at another person and we're going to look at this not just in terms of communication, but strategy. We're going to look at, this is Paul Harrington, who's the CEO of Easton Bell Sports. And they make a number of different things. One of the companies they own is Riddell Helmets. So of course they're squarely in the middle of the concussion controversy. And you would think, okay, this is pretty easy. Okay, actually, Kate, I may come back. Okay, we make a helmet because it will keep our players safe. You think, okay, that's pretty easy. We can't say safe though, because we can't guarantee it, and you can't say things that aren't true. So Paul needs to reinvent the company and its whole culture with another word, and watch what he does.
Is there one overarching philosophy you have when running the company?
Innovation. Absolutely innovation. In our world, in sporting goods equipment, innovation is the key.
Okay. Now, the interesting thing about this, is not just the choice of words, it's that Paul is remaking the company culture with a different thought process. Instead of saying we have to design a helmet that will keep people safe, which you cannot do, you can make people safer. Okay. He says, we want to be innovative. He says, if we think of ourselves as an innovation company, It will reinvent how we deal with customers. It will change our relationship with how we hire people. It will change how we think of ourselves. The other thing about this is that Paul expects every employee at every single Easton Bell company to be able to use those 2 lines and to tell them with you. And again, if we look at the model, notice he's also using the media as one communication channel to reach not only his customers, but his own employees. I think I've done what I wanted to do in terms of words. Oops. Megan, I just lost my, did I shut down my examples?
Sorry, I was muted. If you click on your Chrome icon, then you should be able to pop them back up. And then if you go back to Zoom and share, then they should be available for sharing.
Shoot, what did I do with them?
Do you want me to pop them up on my screen and you can
No,
just tell me which one to
I want
click?
to find them because I want to figure out what I did with them.
Did you click your Chrome icon at the bottom of your screen?
Yep, there it is.
Okay, and then do they pop back up?
Nope.
Did you exit out of the, do you have anything up on your internet browser?
Yeah, I have the Mastering the Media, I have the manual, I have the PowerPoint.
Well, that's up in your ability for what to share, but in terms of you have to have the internet browser up to share the Dropbox links. The Dropbox links.
I've got, it says Dropbox. I got it open.
Okay, and then if you just want to press share, then you should be able to see it as an option.
Let's see if this does it now. I think it may have popped up in a different format. Let's see if we get to these. Okay. The next. All right, the next topic that we're going to talk about are statistics. The statistics cause us lots of trouble. So let's see if we can give you a good example of taking a statistic and putting it within, making it relevant.
Mary, just click the picture or where it says Harley 7. Don't click open. Or just go a little further, just click the words Harley 7. Just click that.
Okay, so here's a good example.
Well, you know, I for one cannot wait to drive this F-150. I want to get the sense of what a truck that's 700 pounds lighter feels like.
I was talking to a colleague the other day, and he said, you know, that's like taking my Harley out of the back of the truck. You know, that's roughly the weight of a Harley. So that's a huge amount of weight.
That's a great example because I don't have any idea what a truck chassis weighs, but the visual image of picking up the Harley Davidson and taking it out of the truck chassis really makes it come alive. Okay, let's take a look at another company that's trying to rethink strategically how it uses communication. And this is Prudential. For years, Prudential.
65 years old.
Okay, let me set the stage for this. For years, Prudential has tried to raise the retirement age, and it's failed completely as it's done that. So a couple of years ago, they said, okay, instead of trying to educate people, we're going to visualize it. And this is the first visualization that they did. It's very straightforward. It's really, it's not an ad, and it's not controlled media. It's that new bridge between them.
When that became the official retirement age, back when my dad was a kid, life expectancy was about 61. Not much of a retirement, huh? Luckily, things have changed. To see how, we went out and asked people a simple question. How old is the oldest person you've known?
The oldest person I really know is probably my grandfather. He's 93.
94. 104 years old.
Then we gave them each a sticker and had them show us. Soon we learned a lot of us have known someone who's lived well into their 90s. And that's a great thing. But even though we're living longer, one thing that hasn't changed, the official retirement age.
And I would encourage all of you to take a look at Prudential's website. There's a whole series of these now. And the interesting thing to me is that not only is there a series about them, but people pass them around. And when you can get people to look at what you've done and repeat it for you, you've really got something that's very special. And these are just have just a touch of light humor. The next thing we're going to take a look at, and actually I'm going to go back to see if I can. Kate, I'm going to try and look at a tell me if this is coming up on the screen or if it's still too hard to see. I want to take a look at the structure of information.
Right now, it's just showing your file. It hasn't opened it yet.
Okay. Okay, so there I'm back to here. Okay, so share screen.
It might have been a bandwidth issue.
Now I've got, before I had it up, and it actually showed the media manual.
You might need to open that PowerPoint presentation first instead of trying to open the file with this shared screen.
This isn't this was the manual I was trying to show it on. See what I've got? I've got the picture of the pyramid in front of me. But you're not seeing that, is that
no, because
right?
you're not sharing it. Do you want me to share the pyramid and you can just talk to it?
Yes, can you do that?
Yeah, I can do that. And I don't know, Kate, do I have ability to share? I think I do. Okay. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. I'll mute myself, Merrie, then you can talk to it.
Okay, now I can't see it, unfortunately.
You can't see it. What about everybody else? Can everyone else see it?
I just stopped the share, but
okay. Now
I can try it again.
I've got the group again, but not the pyramid.
Okay, Merrie, I'm going to do the pyramid again and see if you can see it. All right. I think it was working.
Yeah, the students
for everyone else.
They're saying they could see it.
Okay, I can see it now too. Okay.
Okay.
Now, notice we're all taught, I don't know if you can see the mouse, we're all taught to structure information in the wrong way. That is to build a case, to start here and go up. What we want to do is flip that pyramid over. So we start with what we call a headline. That is something that's short, easy to hear, easy to repeat, and then back it up with proofs. And there are two kinds of proofs, what we call informational proofs, facts and statistics. And then
I don't think we have it on this page. Sorry, Merrie. Oh, here it is.
And then motivational proofs, which are examples, anecdotes, and third-party quotes. So let's go back. Okay, Megan, let's see if we can go back to the examples. Okay, so now I'm back to the group. And now let's go back to another Fred Smith example. All right. Now see if he's going to field a question, and then he's going to start with a headline. So see if you can hear the headline, repeat it back, or at least catch all the good words. It's going to be one short, simple sentence. And then he's going to drop down to informational proof.
What's your opinion on energy reform in this country? What do businesses need to happen for them to prosper and not be hurt as a result?
Well, first and foremost, we've had underway for a number of years now major investments to improve our energy efficiency. We're bringing in the
hint, there's the headline.
These marvelous new 777 freighter aircraft, which are much more efficient than the airplanes that they augment and eventually.
Okay, and then he drops down to informational proofs. And of course, FedEx loves this because if you look at the airplane, he's talking about the 777s, but that's not one of them. So he started with a nice clear headline, okay, increased our investment in energy efficiency. It comes out first, and then he drops down to proof points. We talked about Megan, in which he put up the pyramid. There are informational proof points, facts and statistics, and then there are motivational proof points, which are examples, anecdotes, and quotes. If you think of where we started with FedEx, Mr. Smith started with that phrase, "I will make every FedEx experience outstanding." And it wrapped up to that little phrase called the Purple Promise. So now we're going to take a look at a couple of examples of how he illustrates that and what the executives in the company do to help him. So we're going to start. These are two executives, and they're just sitting talking. Of course, FedEx has got a lot of production capabilities, but for this is Rob Carter, the Chief Information Officer. This is Mike Glenn, the head of shared services. They're at the airport just sitting in these directors' chairs.
We just won the Supplier of the Year award again from Walmart, which is actually a really big deal. You can imagine that the number of suppliers and all the intensity in that Walmart business, they really hold us up as an example of how to partner with them and how to do the right things.
Well, in fact, in the meeting where we were given the award, Walmart actually challenged a lot of their other carriers to try to emulate what FedEx is doing, but they got a long way to go because they don't know how to live the Purple Promise.
And that should be a very familiar phrase, living the Purple Promise. Now, it's also an interesting example because FedEx could put out a press release. They obviously put out an internal announcement, but you have to ask, why are they doing that? And they're doing it because they know people don't read. They're much more likely to listen or to look at something, and Rob and Mike are very popular executives. Okay, still on this same topic. This is Ken May. Here he is the CEO of Kinko's as it begins its journey to turn itself into FedEx Office. He's speaking to about 100 other operating company managers. Okay. The story is called Quincy, and it's what we call a true anecdote because it's got characters and dialogue. And watch Ken play all the parts and where he ends up.
We've got an hourly employee that works delivering mail in our office that I told the story about last week to all 150 of our managers in Dallas. This kid, I got an email about, his name's Quincy. Everybody knows him, he delivers mail. He's just the nicest kid. I got an email from a store that we have downstairs in our facility there in Dallas. This particular kid read one of the emails about people in Dallas helping people in the field, and he was delivering mail to that store, and he heard the team member in there trying to figure out how to meet a customer's needs. The color copier in that store had broke down. And so she was doing everything she could to call around to different stores to figure out how to deliver good customer service without calling the customer back saying, hey, your job's not going to be done on time. So she keeps calling around, can't find anybody that has excess color copy capacity to help her. He's sitting there listening to this while he's delivering the mail, and he goes, hey, I got an idea. We've got color copiers up on the 22nd floor. What about you and I go up there right now and I'll help you do that job so we can meet that customer's needs. They go running upstairs. Both of them together did the job, took it back downstairs. Customer comes in a little bit later. What happens? Customer's elated. Doesn't have any idea that a guy from the mailroom who heard about us trying to take care of the customer was the defining person. I've been using this guy, his name's Quincy. I've been using him in every speech I got over the last few days to highlight how one person can make a difference. And that one person, if Quincy can make a difference, all 20,000 of us can make a difference. And we're working hard on the Purple Promise.
And by now, it should be a very familiar phrase. And you can also see how the executives around Fred pick up his language and amplify it and pass it on. Before we leave the Ken May example, there's one other interesting thing I want to call to your attention because he says it twice. Notice he says, I got an email. In other words, they're on the hunt for these personal examples that really illustrate how people bring alive, I will make every FedEx experience outstanding, not just externally, but internally as well. And they've set up these magnet sites where they've put it out saying, look, I need these illustrations, send them to me, and I'll tell them in as many ways as possible. Now, before we leave stories or anecdotes, I want to jump to another company because, again, this is both a personal skill that we want you to develop and a strategic skill that we want you to manage. Let's take a look at United Healthcare. And the specific situation is Medicare Advantage, which is open enrollment. Now, most of you, I can see immediately you're rolling your eyes. This is about the most boring thing you can think of. We've worked with them for about 8 years. And when we started, when they went out to talk about Medicare Advantage and the importance of enrolling in it, it was pages, 3 actual single-space pages of facts and statistics. But now watch how they've evolved. She's going to ask him a question, a very specific question rooted in a negative word, which is absolutely true, and it's a real question they get all the time. Watch his headline and then watch what he does to bring alive what they're doing.
Healthcare coverage is always sometimes can be really, really complicated. How does Medicare Advantage address that and not make it so complicated for folks who are interested?
Right, so we try to make things as simple and convenient as possible and less complicated. And so
Very good words.
If I could share a story really quick. We have a member, his name is Paul. I'll just share his first name.
Okay.
And Paul is one of our Medicare Advantage members, and he would say that he's a not going to the doctor type person.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm kind of in that boat.
Right, but through his benefit plan, he has what we call house calls. And so Paul accepted a house call visit from one of our nurse practitioners to go out to his home. And through the course of that exam that Paul received, the nurse practitioner suggested that he go in and see his doctor because he had high blood pressure that required immediate attention.
Okay.
So Paul took that advice. He went to see his PCP. And as a result of that visit, Paul learned that he had lung cancer.
Oh my gosh.
Right, and so Paul has received treatment, is doing great, back on his feet again, and that house call visit likely saved his life.
Wow, that is impressive. When can people enroll in the plan?
Right.
If you are an insurance company and you get applause in the middle of an interview, we count that as a home run, bases loaded, major win. That's because, oops, people don't care about United Healthcare, but they'll care about Paul. And again, we've got a couple issues in this. One are your personal skills. Notice the question is, it's complicated. And it's true, it is complicated. And so rather than trying to explain, there's part A, there's part B, there's part C, there's part D, nobody cares. Okay? He jumps right to telling us the story about Paul, and he does a really good job. And I can assure you, he practiced, and he's become highly skilled at storytelling. That's the personal skills part of that. The second part is the strategic part of this, which is moving away from facts and statistics and collecting the stories, which have to be vetted through the lawyer so you can tell them. Now, before we move on to take a quick pass at of just a few things on personal skills, I would like to try and relate this to PowerPoint. So we're going to take a second. So Kate, let's see if this actually, if people can see this, because PowerPoint is PowerPoint is ever present today. And I want to at least take a stab in applying some of these lessons to it. And of course, the first question is, how much should you have on a slide? And of course, the answer is it depends on who your audience is. Some slides have a lot. Now, it's possible to have too much on a slide. The New York Times smuggled this out of Afghanistan. And I have always thought in my heart of hearts that it's why we had so much problems over there. Next question is how many slides? And of course, again, it depends on who's the audience. We have a lot of...
general?
I'm sorry, what? Can we see this?
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to say, isn't in general less that is better than more? It's more memorable or easier to remember?
That's a great question. And the answer you might think is yes. But of course, the first question we ask, remember, is not what am I covering? It's who's my
audience, target market or audience.
Right, who's my audience? We have a number of audiences, for example, things like Six Sigma presentations. People are doing, there are a lot of presentations that are very long. So the question is not just how many slides, it's how you choreograph them. Can you stick with me? Because I'm about to give you in just a couple slides an example of what I mean by that. Great question, and I appreciate you asking it. Okay, one of the things I care a lot about, though, is layout. And Kate, I can't see the hands, but normally at this part in the lecture, in the seminar, I ask, has anybody used a manual typewriter? And there will be, one or two hands that go up. And of course, when you typed in a manual typewriter, you got over to the right edge and you had to return the carriage yourself. The first great technology advancement was the Smith Corona electric typewriter. And then when I say who's used one of those, generally a bunch of hands go up. Because there when you got over to the edge of the margin, it went bing, and it returned it itself. That technology got built into PowerPoint, and that's why you get stuff like this. So notice this, discuss your role in making this meeting in the year ahead, and oops, this little hanging word successful ends up dropped over here. Those are called orphan words or hanging words. And the problem is they screw up your ability to absorb them. If you're going to use bullet points, single words like this share our vision for the future. It's a lot easier to absorb a short thing. The minute you split between lines, you force the person in the audience to go over and scrutinize this, and the minute they do that, they're not listening to you. If you can't get things on one line, there are a couple of ways to do it. One is to break up the sentence the way we'd read it. Discuss your role in making this meeting, breath, and the year ahead successful. Or the second one is to center them. Again, what you're doing is trying to, if you're going to use bullet points, trying to make it easy for the listener to follow you as the speaker. Okay. The next thing, and this is goes to the question was just asked, is to use fonts, sizes, and styles to emphasize key words. A lot of our students today are using PowerPoint not just as a presentation tool, but as a leave behind and a read ahead. And again, Kate, at this point, I'd be asking for hands up. How many of you use PowerPoint in your companies or have a PowerPoint culture? And generally, at least half the hands go up. And then my next question is, how many of you are using it also, or your colleagues are using it as a read ahead or a leave behind? And a bunch of hands go up. So we have to have a way to make it easy and time efficient for you to make PowerPoint do double duty if you have to. So here's where this one started. This is an article. Notice all of it's the same font, all of it's the same size. That requires you to read it. So the first step at this takes the major words and at least bolds them and enlarges them. So the PowerPoint slide is now saying, look at me, read me, as opposed to this. The third thing is to take the text, that is the material here, okay, highlight it, and do what we call gray it out. That is, you take the text, you highlight it, and you take it down to gray. So what you're trying to do is you give visual signals as the speaker. Okay. Follow me with these main words, and I'll talk you through this. It's going to look the same as it does in your handout, your read ahead, or your leave behind, but I've done my best to help me deliver it as well. Now, to the question that was just asked, which is a great question, there is a difference between a visual and a handout. And what you want to do, particularly if you've got a presentation where you've got a lot of material, is to understand that we don't have a lot of success in getting very senior executives to change their handouts. But we've had a lot of success getting them to add them. And here's an example of what I mean. This was from an internal presentation from the CEO of a major defense contractor. It was a global symposium. And if you're reading this, you can see that they have people from 20 countries. I hated this slide. Okay. The CEO loved the slide. So guess what? It stayed. But we could add another slide after this. So he said, we've got people here from 20 countries. And then he could interact with the audience and say, here are 5 of them. Who can name them? And at this point, Kate, in the seminar, as you know, what I do is I say, who can name these? What's this? Getting any answers, Kate?
China.
Okay. And how about this?
Japan.
Absolutely. Okay, let's make it a little harder. How about this one?
Saudi Arabia.
Very good. Okay. But notice what he did. And to the question that was asked about is less more, that's not necessarily true. The CEO was going to use this slide one way or the other. And so what I could do was begin to choreograph the presentation by adding this one so he could play with the audience. He's still really reinforcing his point, which is we've got people from all over the globe, but now it's more interesting. Of course, the main thing about PowerPoint is people have to be able to read the words. I don't know why this is so hard to understand. Every conference I've ever been to, there's somebody who gets up and says, now I know you can't see this. And of course, my response is, then why is it there? All right, how large should fonts be? Again, it really depends on whether you want people to focus on it or whether it's up there as a leave behind. Okay, now here's why I wanted to put this up. We talked about the pyramid and the importance of having nice, clear, easily absorbable, visually headlines. This is what we call a heading. In other words, it's not a headline, it has no point of view, and the graphic is separated from the key. Now, when we redo this, it looks like this. Okay. Now I've got what we call a headline. Readers pay more attention to graphics. Okay. That is, it's got a point of view. There's my headline. And now this, the body of it is visually absorbable. So we went from this to this. And one of the things is in your roles, whether you're working full-time or not, is that for yourself, you've got to pay attention to your PowerPoints so that they're good visuals, not just information dumps. And you've got to help the executives around you understand how to use this. Let's take a look at another one. Okay. Again, this is a heading, and the data is very unclear, but redone, it looks like this. Now I've got a nice clear headline, long-term investments produce greater returns. The data has been redone to look like this, and the addition of the upward sloping line makes it easier to absorb. So we went from this to this. Here's my favorite one. And Kate, I'm so sorry I don't have the group with me because I love to interact with the audience on this. Okay, what's this slide trying to tell you? And people look at it and they say, I have no idea. Okay, and there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, it doesn't have go away. Oops. It doesn't have a headline, it has a heading, and there is so much material on it that it's not clear what it's telling us. And of course, the key is a little teeny weeny bitty type. You need a magnifying glass. And this was used at a symposium by a very senior executive from a very large pharmaceutical company, and it's a very important topic. Here's what it's trying to tell you. Anti-fluoride legislation is moving fast. The dark blue states is where it's already passed, and the turquoise states is where it's an issue in an upcoming election, legislative session. So we went from this to this. Now, to the person who asked the question about is less more, while that's generally true theoretically, in this case, the speaker was not giving up this slide. We did manage to change the headline, but he was going to keep this slide, so we added this one. So he started by saying, I want to talk about how fast anti-fluoride legislation is moving. This is a complete explanation of it, but let's talk about the states where it's passed and the states where it's an upcoming issue. So we added this slide. All right. Here's another example of this. And it was a great question that was asked earlier. This is a Lean Six Sigma presentation, again, from a pharmaceutical company. The researchers had looked at off-site manufacturing facilities and found that people were using the same cleaning standards that they'd been using for years, although the machinery had changed. So they were spending a lot of money. They didn't just say, hey, that's fantastic. All we need to do is clean it less. The problem is, though, is that the people who actually ran the equipment had come to think of more as better. So the question was, how do you educate them in language that they understand? Because they're not going to pay attention to this. So we came up with this, which were two pictures and a story. So the first one asked, have you ever cooked a casserole? Take a look at this. Not finished it, wrapped it in foil, put it back in the icebox, and taken it out the next day. What's it take to clean that twice-baked cheese casserole? You've really got to scrub it and soak it. Now, suppose you have a vinaigrette dressing on a salad. What's it take to clean that? Swish, swish. So they said, okay, here's a checklist with a continuum. Figure out where you are on the continuum between the twice-baked cheese casserole and the vinaigrette salad dressing, and clean it accordingly. So this slide stayed. Instantly, I might say, if any of you've got Lean or Six Sigma processes in your companies, I lose every one of these battles in terms of cleaning up these PowerPoints. But I've learned to add additional stories that take it and make it meaningful. Let me go through this quickly. This is a great example, brand new one for us. We were over in Europe with Reed Exhibitions, the largest purveyor of exhibitions in the world. And one of the country managers was asking the board for about $30 million to clean up technical debt. And at this point, I loved Kate to ask people, okay, anybody know what technical debt is? I didn't either. Yes, I got one. Yes, I got a couple of people. Okay.
Yes, I know.
What does yes. Okay. Do you think most people understand what it means, particularly people who come out of fins? I'm listening.
If you want me to explain. Yeah, so basically is when the company, they have old solutions. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you did it wrong the first time, so now you need to spend more money, go back and fix it.
Both of you are right. Okay, so we want 30 million bucks from the board. Okay, so that's a lot of money. And so the guy he just dove into what they were going to spend $30 million on. But the problem is it didn't set it visually or capture people's attention. So he came back and he used this as a setup, okay? And he asked 3 questions. Would you ever cook a meal in this kitchen? And I think the answer for all of you is a resounding no. And of course the answer is why.
No.
Yes, no. Okay. But look at what it's illustrating. Failure to invest in maintenance causes decay. Okay. Second thing, okay. This is a real house. How'd you like to have that bedroom up there? All right. I don't think so. It's in Germany, actually. But notice it's got a very real, pushing beyond the limits of original design is going to cause failure. Okay. And can't we fix it? Okay. Again, failure to invest in good tooling causes delays and extends outages. And we have these wonderful, so what he did was use these three visual images for his very real points. And when he finished this, and again, to the excellent question, and Kate, I don't know who it is, I would go and say thank you to the person after this. Should you have less instead of more? And again, it really depends on who the audience is and how you're choreographing the presentation. In this case, just jumping right in, how much it was going to cost, what it was going to be used for, you know, all the financial stuff. It didn't paint the picture for the board of what was really going on. Okay. Next thing, also same topic, is I like to turn data into stories, and that means frequently disaggregating information. This is a series of slides where the information started out on one slide and we broke it into 4, and it looks at the relationship between federal spending and education and reading. So here's where we started spending money on this process back in 1966. At the time of this campaign in 2004, this is what it had grown to. So now we're up here at $22+ billion. And then I always turn to the class and say, does that look like a significant increase in spending? What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Does that look like we've spent a lot more?
Yep.
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
it seems like a lot more, a lot more.
A lot more, you bet. Okay, here's where we started measuring it. Okay, now at this point, I love to pick out somebody, but Kate will just let people volunteer. Okay, given how much spending has gone up, how much do you want to see reading scores go up? As much as spending? More than spending? Half as much as spending? What are you hoping for?
At least as much.
Half as much or as much? Okay, good. Would you like to see what really happened? And the answer is nothing. Reading scores are correlated to whether parents read to little kids at home. Now, the policy discussion at this point was we need more money. Okay, that's always the answer. We've got to have more money. And this slide, which initially had all this information on this one slide, goes by too quickly. You need to bring people along with you. That's where we started. That's where it's grown to. Here's where the measurement is. Okay. What do you expect? And everybody answers just the way you all did. Half as much as much, more. When they see that the answer is nothing, then you can ask the question, do you think more money is the answer? And of course, it's not. Right. Okay, I'm going to come back now if I can. There we go.
Quick question.
Yes, oh yes, questions, yes, yes, yes.
So in presentations that go offline.
Sunitha, am I pronouncing your name right? Oh,
that's right.
It's so nice to have a real person ask a question. Yes, go ahead.
So on all these presentations, when they go offline, how do you control the narratives?
I'm sorry, when they go offline, meaning you're just sending it out?
When you're sending it out or when you're printing it, how do you make sure that the message that you want to convey is still carrying across?
Well, that's a very good question. What we see most frequently, again, is what I mentioned, people are using PowerPoint as a read ahead or a leave behind, as well as a presentation tool. And so my goal with this is to make it useful to you, both as a leave behind and a read ahead and a presentation tool. So the first thing I would do is take a look at the material rigorously and ask yourself, okay, does each slide have a clear headline? Okay. Have I put it together so that it can be skimmed And by skimmed, I don't just mean glanced at. I mean, can the person go absorb it without actually reading each word and each line? Generally, Sunitha, was it you who asked the question about is less more, or was that somebody else?
No, that was somebody else. So I think that's kind of tying back to her question as well, is how much is enough?
Again, the first question you ask is, who's my
audience?
Audience, right. Some of the Six Sigma or the heavily technical PowerPoints that we do can be really dense, but they're going to a group of people who are speaking the same language. Let me tell you where the problem arises and give you an example, and I'll use my beloved FedEx as an example. The IT people, who are a separate audience for us, speak a highly technical, almost impenetrable language. When they deal with their counterpoints at the other operating companies, they're on the same page. They're speaking the same language. They're talking about the same equipment. The problem comes is when the people at the other operating companies have to then go talk to the people above them who are in sales, marketing, finance, or the legal department. And if they talk to them the way they're talking to the IT folks in the IT department, the miscommunication is horrible. So that's why you have to first ask, who's the audience? If you're preparing stuff just for the IT folks at another operating company, you know, you can have a mind meld, but then you have to think, how are they going to use this? And how can I help them organize it and format it? And there, to the person who asked the right question, is less better? The answer is yes, in terms of if you take it page by page. I would rather have 60 pages, each one very, very simple, than have everything jammed. And if